Okay, so this evening we have a variety of different speakers. First of all, myself. So I'm Kate Fortnam and I'm the campaign manager of the Green Blue. The Green Blue is the environmental awareness programme for the RWA and British Marine. And we're hosting the webinar this evening because it's particularly focused at the recreational boating community. I'm also joined by Alan, who is a senior marine advisor from Natural England. And he's actually the site lead for the Essex site in the ReMEDIES project, which this webinar is linked to. Alan has joined us this evening because Ruth, who's the site lead for Plymouth, unfortunately she's unwell this evening, and Alan and Megan, who I'm going to introduce, have jumped on to the webinar this evening to help out. So that's fantastic. Next we've got Dave. So Dave Curnow is the RWA Southwest Regional Planning and Environmental Rep, but he's also our Green Blue coordinator and he's one of our volunteers. So he gives up a lot of time supporting clubs in the region and area, and he communicates back to the RWA and the Green Blue at headquarters. So we're based in Hamble in Southampton. And then Megan has come on this evening to support us, and she's also from Natural England, and actually her focus area is the Falmouth and Helford site, which is another site that we're looking at in terms of seagrass anchoring and mooring best practice. So it's great to have this selection of speakers. So the contents of the webinar this evening, we're going to be first of all introducing the ReMEDIES project, which is why this webinar is being put on, and the involvement from the RWA, the Green Blue and other partners. And then we're going to introduce you to what seagrass is, why it's important, and then what are the threats that are facing this particular habitat. And of course, recreational activities is one of those threats, and that's what the project is focusing on. Then we're going to share with you some anchoring best practice as boaters, and also tell you a little bit about advanced eco mooring systems. So it's new technology, so really exciting. And then we're going to go through a little bit more site focus for the Plymouth Sound area, because I'm presuming most of you on the call or on the webinar this evening sail in this area. I want to find out a little bit more. And then we got the Q&A at the end. But feel free to put any questions in the chat as we go through, because speakers, when we're available, we can answer those, and then we'll try and get through as many of those as possible towards the end. So I'm now going to pass you over to Alan from Natural England, and he's going to introduce the project, because Natural England is the lead in the ReMEDIES project. Okay, Alan.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us tonight. So yeah, as Kate said, I'm actually the Essex site lead for the project, and soon I'm going to be swapping over from Essex and taking on the Isles of Scilly region of the project as I move from Essex down to Devon. So for the ReMEDIES project, our website is saveourseabed.co.uk. So if you head there, you can find out a lot more about the project. You can read some blogs, and you can also sign up to the mailing list and the newsletter so that you're kept up to date with things. And there's also lots of volunteering opportunities that you can get involved with. So ReMEDIES stands for Reducing and Mitigating Erosion and Disturbance Impacts Affecting the Seabed. So we're looking at lots of different things within the project, but we are focusing on the recreational impacts. Next slide, please. So it's actually funded by the EU, and it's a 4-year project. And we're focusing on 5 special areas of conservation. So these are areas that have been designated due to their fragile habitats. So starting in the west, we've got the Isles of Scilly complex, the Fallon Helford, coming east into the Plymouth Sound and estuaries, Solent Maritime, and then lastly up there as an outlier on the east coast of the UK, the Essex Estuaries, SAC. In these areas, we're looking to restore and protect the seabed habitats. So not only are we looking at like the mud and the sand environments, we're also looking at what's living there. So this is why we're focusing on seagrass and merle, because they're supporting a wide range of bird species and other species that live there. When I say we're focusing on recreational activities, so this goes further than just boating, and we're also looking to access dog walkers and swimmers, paddle boarders, kayakers, looking at all the recreational activities and looking just to raise awareness and mitigate any potential disturbance impacts. Next slide, please. So to achieve this, we're working with a lot of different partners. So as I said, we're funded by the EU Life Programme and Natura 2000. And Natural England are the lead partner, but we're also working with the RYA, who are doing a lot of the anchoring and mooring outreach as we are tonight, together with the Green Blue. Marine Conservation Society are doing a lot of the wider monitoring and outreach for the other recreational activities. We're also working with the Ocean Conservation Trust of the National Marine Aquarium. So they're doing a lot of the seagrass restoration that Dave will be talking about later. And then we're also partnered with Plymouth City Council. Next slide, please. So as I said, we're focusing on the 5 special areas of conservation, or SACs, and we're focusing on these particular 5 because they're currently in unfavourable condition on a scale that goes from unfavourable, declining, right up to favourable condition. And in these areas, we've seen significant long-term reductions in seagrass extent and quality, so the actual health of the seagrass is in decline. Research shows that at least 44% of the UK seagrass has been lost since 1936, so it is a particularly stressed habitat. And this is partly because of a wasting disease that hit particularly hard in the 1970s. I'm not sure of the figures in Plymouth, but in Essex, our historic, we're only 2% of our historic maximum of seagrass extent, so it really has wiped out a lot of the seagrass. And recreational activities are contributing to the disturbance of the seabed habitats in these sites. Obviously they're popular because of their natural beauty, but then this brings other impacts as well. There are impacts aside from recreational activities, but being that they are responsible for humans, and we have some way of being able to mitigate these impacts relatively easily. Next slide, please. So that's a kind of a very quick introduction to the project. So I'm going to hand you over to Meg, who's going to tell you a bit more about what seagrass is and the threats.
Thanks for that, Alan. So what is seagrass and why is it important? So seagrass are the only flowering plants that are able to live in seawater and pollinate while submerged. They often grow in large groups, giving the appearance of terrestrial grassland, and that's why they're known as an underwater meadow. There are 4 species of seagrass in the UK, but in the southwest we normally get Zoster species, which is commonly known as eelgrass. Seagrass is dependent on high light levels for photosynthesis to grow and therefore found in coastal waters. Here you can see the reproduction cycle for seagrass. So you get seeds on seagrass and they kind of look like little bumps on the strands of the flowering plants. They land in the water, you get our seagrass saplings, and then they grow into adult plants, creating rhizomes in the root systems, and then larger plants that then go on to flower again. Next slide, please. So here's a map of where the seagrass beds can be found in Plymouth. Dave's going to go into this a little bit more detail a bit later. Something else you can also look to find where seagrass is found within your area is going onto the magic maps produced by DEFRA and searching in the marine section for the area you want, and this will highlight where seagrass beds are found. Next slide. So seagrass, with its long narrow leaves, creates a 3-dimensional habitat for a wide range of different species. So in seagrass, we're lucky to have so many different species. Quite a common species that's often found is snake-lock anemones that attach to the leaf fronds. And then we get an amazing array of kind of quite rare species that we don't often find, from seahorses to stalk jellyfish to cuttlefish and pipefish, which are all amazing to see in these habitats. Slide. So why is seagrass so important? So seagrass is vital for a variety of different reasons. So the plant roots are anchored into the mud and sand or fine gravel. This acts to stabilise seabeds and prevents erosion, which has a further effect of helping to stabilise and defend wider coastlines. It's been calculated that seagrass is responsible to 15% of ocean total carbon absorption. It plays a big part in commercial fishing species and is part of 70% of commercial fishery species. It improves water quality. It provides food and habitat for other marine organisms, as well as nursery grounds for them fish species. Slide. However, seagrass is under threat from a variety of different reasons. So there's a wasting disease that was caused dramatic reduction in seagrass in the UK in the 1930s. The following recovery has been hampered by increased human disturbance, such as pollution and physical disturbance from dredging, use of mobile fishing gear and coastal development. Sewage discharge high in nutrients is extremely toxic to seagrass, but it also acts as a stimulant for algae to growth, which can outcompete the seagrass by reducing the availability of sunlight. The ability of seagrass to reduce the speed of currents can result in pollution accumulating in the seagrass beds. Several heavy metals have been found to reduce the plant's ability to fix nitrogen, reducing its ability to survive. Globally, seagrass is at threat, and already we've lost 80% of the global area of seagrass. Another one of them threats is to do with damage from anchoring and mooring. Next slide. So we've got our anchoring and mooring impacts. Slide. So here you can see the impacts that have occurred from anchoring. This is direct impact to the seagrass fronds and roots as the anchors embed into the seagrass. Dragging on anchors can uproot and degrade the seagrass. Anchoring canes can scour and abrade the seagrass beds and therefore damage any existing habitats as it pivots around the anchor point with the tide and changes in wind direction. So you can see here where the anchor's gone in and caused seagrass to disappear. So we've also got traditional swing moorings. So here you can see an aerial shot from St Mary's and Isles of Scilly, and you can see them little circles, and that's caused from the chain rolling around, and you can see where the seagrass in the kind of darker patches is still healthy where there's no boats anchored on it. So as the tide rises and falls, differing amounts of chain will lie across the seabed and will be pulled around in circles as the tide and wind direction changes. So next slide. So traditional swing moorings are mostly commonly used in UK seawaters. These moorings consist of an anchor chain and a float, which can be seen in the diagram. Any part of the mooring that interacts with the seabed has the potential to damage any habitats that exist there. So here you can see the main anchor block and then the chain going out, and you can see a large area of kind of like dead zone. There's no seagrass species there. It's kind of very like grey. There's not many species there. And as we kind of slowly pan out, you can see that kind of extends from where the chain has been rubbing against the seabed. And you can see there, as it pans out, the healthy seabed, which is at the end of where the chain is. And we've got our healthy seagrass bed for species to inhabit. Slide. So thanks for listening to why seagrass, what it's about and why is it important. I'm going to pass over to Dave. I'm going to pass over to Kate to talk about advanced best practice in the UK mooring systems.
Thanks, Megan. Before I get started, I'm going to put a little poll up because I would love to know a little bit more about who's on the call this evening. So I'm going to release some questions. So you should see it pop up on your screen and you have to select from a checkbox. So I'll let you know once I've launched the first one. So the first one's about what type of boat the first one is whether you're a participant in recreational boating or use of craft, or whether you're an RWA instructor. So I'm going to launch that now, and hopefully you'll see that come up on the screen. If you don't, have a look in the chat area and either scroll right up to the top or you'll see it pop up. And then what you need to do is just check the boxes that apply to you. You can do more than one and then submit, and then it is anonymous, and then the results will come through. Okay, so starting to see. So at the moment we've got 75% of people participate in recreational activities or watercraft activities that are on the webinar. We've got a few that don't. So coming along interested in to find out a little bit more about seagrass and the project. And no instructors on this evening or commercial skippers. Okay, interesting. So, oh, we're balancing out now. So it's nearly a nice balance between those participating and those not. So 50-50. Interesting. Okay, now I'm going to launch the next one. And again, if you're not seeing this pop up, if you pop in the chat, you can just write that you're a participant or you're not a participant. So if it's not working for you, it does happen occasionally for some people. You can always just type in the chat your answer. So the next one's going to be coming up now. And the question is, what type of boat or craft do you mainly use? So if you can't see that, then please do write it in the chat. We'd love to know what kind of vessel or craft you use. The options are sail yacht, sail dinghy, a motor yacht, power boat or rib, personal watercraft. So an example of that is a jet ski, whether you're a windsurfer or a kite surfer, or whether you do paddle sports. So that's canoeing, kayaking, paddleboarding, rowing, or if you don't, because I know some of you initially said that you don't participate in recreational boating, then you can just click not applicable. So I'm going to do mine. Okay, so majority sailing yachts and a few dinghy sailors in there, and paddle sports. So a great audience to speak to this evening. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a little bit about what the Green, Blue and the RWA are doing in terms of raising awareness and supporting you as a boating community in helping to safeguard these amazing habitats. So if you're not familiar with the Green Blue, like I said at the beginning of the webinar, we're the joint environmental programme between the RWA and British Marine. We've been around for the last 16 years, but our goal is to raise awareness of environmental issues and support the boating community in being more sustainable on coastal and inland waters. And we are partners within the ReMEDIES project to communicate specifically with the recreational boating community and what we can do to support. So as part of that, we've developed a guide that you can go to the Green Blue website and download, and it's pretty much encompasses everything we're covering in the webinar this evening. It just doesn't have the site specific information, but you can download that, and you can also request hard copies. So if you're members of clubs, for example, or if you know any instructors, then you can get a batch of those for free and you can display them and hand them out to fellow members. So do go along and visit the Green Blue website. We've got other green boating guides available as well. Now, as part of the best practice that we're supporting boaters with is, first of all, the feedback we got in the initial stages of the project, sort of 2 years ago when we were doing surveys and also webinars, is as boaters, we need to know where the seagrass areas are to then make an educated decision on avoiding anchoring in them. So what the project's done is it does have habitat maps on the website currently, but the RWA, what we've done is we've also created our own maps, and you can see an example of one for the Plymouth Sound area here. And if you go onto the Green Blue website, we've got a designated section called Anchoring with Care under the information and advice area, and you can see all the maps for the 5 project sites. What we're currently doing is we're getting nautical maps. And my colleague at the RWA is then putting on the layers of seagrass as well as any voluntary no anchor zones. And what we're going to be doing that is putting those and updating these ones onto the Green Blue website. We're also going to be providing those to sailing clubs and marinas to display around Plymouth Sound. And that is to help you as boaters identify where they are. The other thing the project's looking at is having visual references on the water. So when you approach an area that you're thinking about anchoring in, how do you know there's seagrass there? So on the right hand side here, you can see a marker buoy. And this one is actually in Jennycliff Bay to mark out the voluntary no anchor zone there. And the project's very interested in this in terms of just marking out on the water where seagrass is, even if it isn't a voluntary no anchor zone. And we have had very positive reception from that, and we've seen less boaters going into the areas because it's helping them see that on the water. So it's definitely something that the project's going to look more into going forwards. Other things we're doing is we're working with IMRE publications because they're interested in putting it on their charts as well as in their pilotage books to help boaters, because we felt we needed to be using things that boaters are using already. The other thing that many of you are probably thinking is, why not the digital charts we use on our yachts? We have spoken with a lot of the software companies, and they're definitely very keen to have the seagrass layers on there that you can click on as boaters when you're thinking about where you're going to anchor or planning your, your routes of passage, etc., and better informing. Going forwards with that, though, it's deciding who's going to administer that and who's going to provide the seagrass data ongoing. It might be that Natural England do because they're doing the surveys, but that's something the project is currently in discussion with, but we know that's going to be useful for boaters. So once we know where the seagrass areas are, so you've seen the maps of Plymouth Sound, is the advice that we're giving is anchor or more away from those areas. Then the next thing is, if you can't, if you are needing to go into that area for any reason, then please do use an existing mooring. So that is to prevent you from doing the anchoring. So use an existing mooring, and even better if there's an advanced eco mooring system in place, and they should have markers on the buoys to indicate it, then please moor up to one of those, because as we've seen previously, they help to minimise the impact of our traditional swing moorings. Then finally, if your only option is to anchor in a seagrass area because of emergency reasons, and also in the voluntary no anchor zones, because we know that weather can change or we might have an issue on board, then it's really important to look at the techniques of our anchoring. So if you've been on an RWA course, then a lot of this is going to be familiar with you. But it's looking really at securing your vessel and making sure there's no drag, but actually it has a secondary benefit to the seabed. So choosing the correct anchor for sand, which is where seagrass likes to grow, will ensure that that anchor embeds quickly and doesn't drag through and cause uprooting. The next thing is anchor chain. So in the RWA's handbooks, you'll see that this diagram is familiar. And the RWA recommend that you use 4 times the maximum height of depth of water that you're going to be in an area for your chain length, and then it's 6 times if you're using a mixture of chain and warp. Obviously, this is just a recommendation. You know your vessel well, you know what length of chain you will need to secure it. But the idea is, what we're trying to communicate here is keep it to an absolute minimum, because any additional length on your chain is going to cause additional abrasion, and I've got a diagram to help explain that. So here's an example. So we've got the anchor in the middle, and then we got our chain length going out across the seabed. So just for an example, 6 meters of chain on the seabed. If it does a full pivot around that anchor point in the change of wind or tide, then it can cover 130 meters squared abrasion. Now let's say, we'll add on a few more bits of chain going out just for a bit of extra security. But this is just showing you, even if 2 extra meters is added on to make it 8 meters, it then goes up to 201 meters squared potential abrasion on the seabed. So that's nearly double just from, a bit of extra chain. So you can really see how we as boaters can make small adjustments to actually have a really positive impact on the seabed. The guy on the foredeck here, he's flaking out the chain to get that accuracy and length if you don't have an automatic chain deployment to count it out. So recommendations are mark out the chain to make sure that whoever's on the foredeck, your crew, can actually count out how many meters are being deployed, and that gives them the accuracy. Dave, who's online, he knows that it's about a meter from where the chain comes out to the first hatch on his boat, so he kind of flakes out his chain according to that. But it's important, if you've got crew on board, that you're communicating well with them on how much chain and how they're going to do that. So just some tips there. Now, some of you on the line said that you're dinghy sailors, paddle boarders, you may not have an anchor on board. There's still things that you can do. So seagrass obviously grows in shallow waters, and some seagrass can be exposed when the tide goes out. So you have intertidal seagrass. So in that case, we've got to be really careful not to land and launch our vessels out through those areas, because the trailer wheels, the trampling of our feet can damage the fronds of the seagrass. So use designated slipways. The next thing is check the tides and the depth, because we want to be avoiding coming into contact with that seagrass, either with our props or with the hull of our vessel. Now, if by any chance you do come into contact with the seabed vegetation, if there's still enough water, then stop your engine, lift your prop up, and then paddle away. If you run aground and you're stuck there, please don't get out of the vessel and try and drag it or motor your way out. You're going to have to sit there and wait for the tide to come back in and let the vessel drift off. But you can avoid those two things by making sure you're checking your tide and depths in the area. So that's how we can identify where seagrass is, avoid anchoring in those areas, and perfecting our technique on anchoring. But what are the alternatives for us as boaters if we still want to have access to these areas that are busy, they're beautiful, we still want to go there, it's part of our freedom and enjoyment? What are the alternatives? Well, we're looking into advanced eco-mooring systems. So the project has installed some of these already, but I'm going to show you a quick little video that the project's developed to help raise awareness of what these advanced eco-mooring systems are. Yeah.
Our coastlines are enjoyed by millions of boaters every year, but with these numbers only set to grow, some of our fragile marine ecosystems are increasingly under threat. Traditional swing moorings can damage seabed habitats, like seagrass and merle beds, that provide homes for marine wildlife, support coastal economies, and play a vital role in carbon storage and the fight against climate change. In these traditional moorings, a chain with a floating buoy at one end attaches to an anchor block on the seabed. As the tide and wind changes, sections of the chain can scour the seabed, causing damage. With advanced mooring systems, or AMS, the buoy on the surface is attached either through a highly durable elastic riser or a chain riser with a series of floats, stopping contact between the riser and the seabed. Additionally, the traditional anchor block, which can move in strong weather, can be exchanged for a helical screw anchor, carefully screwed into the seabed. AMS are reliable, insurable, and take up less space than traditional moorings. Having been used elsewhere in the world for 30 years, AMS are now being trialled across the UK to ensure we preserve and continue to enjoy our wonderful coastline for decades to come. Be part of the solution. To find out more, visit saveourseabed.co.uk.
Okay, so that's a nice little video to kind of introduce you to what advanced eco-mooring systems are and the different types. I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail on some of those. So the first one you saw in the video was a flex riser with a helical screw. So this diagram here shows you the helical screw going into the seabed, and then the riser that goes up, that flexes with changes in the water height, and also when the vessel is attached to the buoy. So it takes that kind of snatching point out. On the right hand side, you can actually see what one looks like. This is the helical screw. It's a 2 meter length screw, this one, and then attached is the elastic riser, and this one in particular is the Hazelet marine riser. The others that are available are Seaflex, and also there's one being trialled up in the northwest of Wales, which is called Safe Moor. So you're more than welcome to go and have a look at those online. We do have a webinar recording on the Green Blue website where we had the manufacturers come on and discuss their different components. So if you want to know more about the technical side of these mooring systems, then please do visit the website and watch that recording. But we can also put you in contact with certain people if you want to. So do drop us a line in the chat. The ABC anchors, so I think Richard actually is on the call now on the webinar. So it's his company, they're a construction company. So they actually use these in the construction of buildings. And he delivered a fascinating talk on helical screws and how, you know, all our old jetties actually used this method. But back in the old days, they had horses and people turning the helical screw into the seabed, and as you can see, a lot of our old jetties are still standing, so they're pretty robust. But if you've got any specific questions around that, then I'm sure Richard would be happy to answer that at the end. In terms of helical screw, I've just got a little video here showing you how it's actually installed into the seabed. I always find this really fascinating to watch and find out how they do it. So I'm just going to play you a little clip. So essentially it's done with a diver with a mechanical equipment that attaches to the helical screw, and then that's powered by a vessel on the surface. So the diver will maintain its keeping it vertical, and I think there's also an additional float above him to keep it upright. And then you can see the mechanical mechanism here turning that screw into the seabed. The great thing about these helical screws is you can actually measure the torque that it goes into the seabed and therefore determine how much weight that they can hold. And depending on the substrate, you can add on extra meters onto the helical screws. They come in as standard sort of 2 meters, but you can add on additional length of piping. And then once it's in the seabed, here you can see this is all that is exposed. And then there's a shackle put on the top. And this is where the riser, or you could still put a chain on there, is attached. And you can see how it pivots around there, taking up a hell of a lot less room than our large anchor blocks. And I've seen a lot of different anchor blocks on the seabed, including tyres filled with cement and all sorts. So I think, and I'm sure Richard will probably provide more detail, but it can hold sort of between 10 to 15 tons, I think, with this 2 meter one. So the other method is something called a Stirling mooring, and this is what we find at Corsan Bay in Plymouth. So this is again using a helical screw. I'll show you a video of what it looks like so you can see it in real life. So this was filmed at Corsan Bay under the water, and instead of having an elastic riser, you're attaching floats. It's less expensive for an advanced mooring system, but this is what's in place. They're quite effective, especially when you've got deep waters. Some of the elastic risers are limited in terms of you can see here on the float where the chains are braiding. So if that chain was lying on the seabed, that is essentially what would be happening to the vegetation. So it kind of gives you a bit of a clear idea there as well. Okay, so I've introduced you to a bit about what you can do as boaters to help out, and also introduced you to advanced eco mooring systems. The project is trialling them, and it's monitoring one, their effectiveness with securing vessels, and we're monitoring getting feedback from mooring owners on those that they've swapped in to trial them out. And we're also monitoring the seabed around to see whether seagrass is recovering. And in Corsan Bay, recent survey on divers going down they're noticing the seagrass is starting to restore and recover, which is fantastic. Okay, I'm going to pass you over to Dave now, who's going to give you a bit more site specific. Dave is from Plymouth. Some of you may recognise him around the boating community, but he's our rep in the area and he's a local boater down there as well. So I'm going to pass over to you, Dave.
Hi there, thanks Kate for that. So this is familiar anchorage for Plymothians, it's Corsan Bay. Next slide. And these are the seagrass beds in and around Plymouth. And of these, there's not much anchoring at Devil's Point, but North Drakes Island is a designated anchorage, although it's not a very popular one. Jenny Cliff is very popular in easterly. Corsan Bay is probably everyone's favourite anchorage in Plymouth Sound. And Sellers Cove in the mouth of the Yelm is a small but well-used anchorage in the Yelm. Next slide. So this shows the voluntary no anchor zone off of Jenny Cliff, which was put in last year. That's designated by the Notice to Mariners, which has been updated to 22 of 22. And the area in yellow with the green rectangles in is the voluntary no anchor zone in Jenny Cliff Bay. There's a couple of areas to the south of that. One area in green which shows the seagrass, and then an area in yellow which is a perspective for further seagrass reseeding. And last year there was some reseeding in the voluntary no anchor zone, and there's some more planned for this year. It's a fairly new technique, so they're changing how they do it and what they do with it from year to year. All right, the activities for the ReMEDIES project in Plymouth Sound, Jenny Cliff Bay restoration site, that's planting seagrass. You can see the little bags of seagrass in the top right hand corner. They were planted in 2021 in about a third of the area of the voluntary no anchor zone, and they've got plans to do that, to do more of that over the next year. I think they're looking for volunteers at the moment to put seeds into seed bags for that, and that will increase the area of up to 4 hectares. So that's the voluntary no anchor zone is in Jenny Cliff Bay. There's 6 markers indicating where that seagrass is being planted, and that's just to ensure that you know exactly where it is on the water and you can avoid it. There is a space to the north of that where you can anchor and still get shelter from the easterly. Next slide, please. This is a seagrass collection from...
Hi everyone, I'm Emma. I am the seagrass culture at the Ocean Conservation Trust for the Life Recreation ReMEDIES project. We are here today just off the coast of Looe. Really excited. It's the first day of diving to collect seagrass seeds for our cultivation and restoration efforts to restore seagrass beds on the south coast. So there's some divers in the water at the moment collecting seagrass seeds. We'll then take them back to the lab and we will cultivate the seeds into little seedlings to replant out and restore our seagrass beds.
Okay, so these are some of the advanced mooring systems that have already been installed in Plymouth Sound. Over in Corsan Bay, currently they're for the existing mooring holders over in Corsan. 10 Sterling type moorings installed, and quite recently 2 Seaflex with elastomer moorings. I know that Seaflex and Hasler don't like them being called elastic bands or bungee moorings. The Sterling moorings are particularly suitable for the large tidal ranges that we get in Plymouth, 6 meters. The Seaflex ones, we're trying those out to see if they will cope with the 6 meter tidal range. And on the right hand side there, you can see the helical screw anchor, and that one has gone right into the seabed, just about only the top poking out of that. So the swim area markers there have been replaced by the helical screws with advanced mooring system moorings. Next slide, please. So this is what the project's doing as far as education and outreach for seagrass. We've got various information panels on seagrass around Plymouth Sound. That's upgrades to the normal information. There's a advanced eco mooring video for through the Green Blue project and on the Save Our Seas website. You can see in the picture there's some a sculpture of seagrass, I think it's and there's various art projects going on with that. I've got some webinars, including this one for boat users, and some school projects, including a school game that's being developed at the moment, and we're present at various boat shows and that. I've put a link in the chat pointing to the Queen's Harbour Masters watercraft leaflet for Plymouth Sound. It contains information on seagrass and loads of other useful information about the port. It's due to be updated this March, April, so the current version is 2018, but there will be a 2022 version, hopefully by the end of April. Next slide, please.
So yeah, so that brings us to the end of the webinar. Just to go through and recap what we've covered. So we did an introduction to the ReMEDIES project, so we hopefully know a little bit more about that, but please do go and visit the website to get any additional details. We've gone over the importance of seagrass in particular as a habitat and some of the threats, and the project understands there are multiple threats to this particular habitat, but this project in particular is focusing on recreational activities, and other projects focus on other threats, but we are aware of that. And then we shared with you some of the anchoring best practice and an introduction to advanced mooring systems, and then a little bit more detail about your local waters where you undertake your sailing, and what the project is doing within the Plymouth Sound area. So now's an opportunity to put any questions into the chat for any of us. Obviously you've got myself from the Green Blue, Dave, Richard Robinson, who's from ABC Anchors, so if you want to know more details about that. And Alan from Natural England is still on as well. But any questions that you do have, we can also feed back to the wider ReMEDIES team. So we've got a large group of people and partners involved, and hopefully we'll be able to answer your question. So the other thing I wanted to share, and I'm going to be putting into the chat, is a mini survey, and there is a prize draw involved in it as well, which is great. The survey is essentially to get a bit of an idea of what you've learned from the webinar, and as a boater, what you will take away from it, and potentially what best practice you might adopt going forwards. There is a section in there for comments as well, so if you've got any feedback to give us, at all that we can feedback to the wider project. We meet fortnightly with all the partners and the leads, and what I do is I feedback any information from these webinars. It is all completely anonymous, and it just helps us going forwards. So when we talk about where seagrass is in the locations and the fact that boaters want it on digital charts, that's all come out of the webinars and information we're chatting to the boating community. So please do put any comments in that you may have. So I'll give you a little bit of time to think about any questions whilst I'll get that link up for you and add it in the chat. So I'm just going to put the link in now. It should take you about 5 minutes to do. It's a pretty quick survey, and you'll be in with a chance of winning a £50 voucher, which is always nice. Okay, so I just put the link in there. So if you click on that, it'll open up a web page for you, and then you can just go through. Obviously, if you don't want to be entered into the prize draw, then you don't have to enter your name and email address, but that allows us to get in contact with you. And also, if you want to keep updated with the project, that just allows us to communicate. But the survey is really valuable to us, and the more boater users we can get, filling that in, the better idea we have of sort of the effectiveness of these webinars and how we're supporting. In the future, after the sailing season, probably sort of October time, we'll probably ask to get back in contact with you as boaters and just see over the sort of summer period, did you adopt any of the best practice we shared this evening? So you might go and pop over to Jenny Cliff Bay. Did you anchor outside? What's your experience with it? Any feedback is very much welcomed. It is a project where we're learning as we go along, and from all that information we're developing, and this is hopefully going to be a legacy to better inform projects around the rest of the UK, but also Europe as well. Okay, so just have a look in the chat. So question from Paul. Are there any plans for a voluntary no anchor zone in Cassandra Bay? So Dave, did you want to answer that question?
Yes, Corsan Bay. There's no current plans for
Oh, Corsan, yeah. I was going to say, I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, no current plans for a voluntary no anchor zone in Corsan Bay. I'll just put my top tip there for Corsan Bay anchoring. If you anchor outside of the 5-meter contour on the chart, then you will be most likely to be outside of the seagrass. And that gives you an easy way of finding out when you're inside or outside of the seagrass.
Any sort of proposed voluntary no anchor zones will be communicated out with any of the boating community anyway beforehand. So there's always opportunities to input into anything like that. But yeah, there's no plans for that currently. Let's have a look at another question. How successful has the seeding in Jenny Cliff Bay been? So feedback from that is due to COVID, they planted the seeds a little bit later than they intended to for maximum output. Some of the seagrass is coming through, but it hasn't been as successful as they would like it to be, just because of that delay with getting people out to actually deploy it in time. Dave, you've also got some information on that as well.
Yeah, there's been various things which they've learnt from that planting, and they've got another planting this year, and they'll adapt to what did work and what didn't work last year, and hopefully that will then be more successful this year. I think there's also issues with how it germinates and all sorts of things, but this sort of thing has been used before in the Halford with a certain amount of success there. So it's just really finding out which works best in the area that they're using.
Okay, we've got another question. Is seagrass being planted where boaters don't typically anchor, or is it not necessary? So, I mean, on that side of thing, in Jennycliff Bay, it was obviously in an area where people traditionally might anchor. But what the project does is it looks at the historical areas of where seagrass was growing to know that that is a potential site to reseed, and then they'll choose those. And obviously, if it's going to be in an area where there's less anchoring, then there's an opportunity there to restore that seagrass habitat. Alan, you might have a little bit more information on that from Natural England.
Yeah, I think it's tough because traditionally seagrass is a good place to anchor because it provides a sturdy anchorage, which in itself has led to some of the decline of seagrass that we have seen historically. So in the areas where it's being replanted are in historic beds, so that there's a bit of a Venn diagram style overlap in that the seagrass beds that are being replanted are sometimes where boaters are anchoring, but there are other areas that have good habitat where we can expand to. So it's a bit of both. Like we're not just targeting those areas that are being anchored on. They're just the areas that are historically seagrass beds with recreational impacts.
Thank you, Alan. One coming back to you, Dave, here. Dave's top tip for Corsan Bay anchoring. If you're anchoring outside the 5 metre contour, will you most likely be outside the seagrass? So does the seagrass extend beyond that 5?
That is my top tip, Kate. So if you're anchor outside the 5 metre contour.
Well, I need to put my glasses on this evening. Sorry.
I think that's generated the next question actually, as to what depth does the seagrass stop growing? And I expect Alan can give us a better indication than I can. But in Plymouth, it seems to be about 5 metres below chart datum. Alan will know the depths for Essex and the Isles of Scilly, which is two extremes, I think.
Yeah, that's a good example actually, Dave. So because seagrass is a photosynthesizing plant, it needs enough light in order to photosynthesize. So it really depends on the local conditions as to what depth is. In Essex, we have very little subtidal seagrass simply because we have a muddy estuarine habitat, so there's not really enough light penetration to go past 2-3 meters, and even then it's not really enough to support a seagrass population due to the attenuation of the light. In the sandier areas along the south coast, so Isles of Scilly, Fallon, Halford, Plymouth, it does go a bit deeper, simply because it allows for more light penetration because of the sand. It's much clearer, which is how comes we can get really good aerial footage like the one you saw of the Isles of Scilly earlier in the presentation. So yeah, it really depends on the local conditions.
Thanks, Alan, for that. Having a look down. Would most sailing clubs be aware of this via our way, or is it work in progress? So Is that in terms of the project or in terms of, I don't know, Doug, if you could be a little bit more specific, that'd be great, and then we'll be able to answer that. But essentially, if you're talking about general awareness, the Green Blue as the awareness programme is communicating this out, so through internal newsletters, through these webinars, also communicating with clubs, and with all the materials, we're encouraging clubs across the sites to display them. And going back to the information panels, we're working with marinas to have those signs put up with nautical charts of where the seagrass is. And then we're going to have those in poster formats that clubs can, you know, print out or order hard copies direct from us. We distribute that all for free, and then it can be put on display. But I very much recommend following the project newsletter. That gives you all the information. Then our way side, the Green Blue, we're communicating out through our social media, Our Way's media, and if you get the Our Way magazine, you should see there's quite a few articles that's been on seagrass, and there's one coming up that we've been working on. So if you look at all those and receive them, then you should be getting them through the network. I hope that answers your question. Would my sailing club need educating? Well.
Just one thing on the you know, reaching out to clubs. It is work in progress because it's always going to be work in progress. In the Plymouth area, we're working through the Port of Plymouth Sailing Association to get messages out to clubs, and obviously with Queen's Harbour Master as well, and various other organisations. So that's what we're trying to do, but we rely on everybody else to, you know, spread the word as well. So, you know, we want those discussions at the bar between sailors about seagrass in Plymouth.
We are doing these webinars. Obviously, during the COVID period, we weren't able to do the sort of face-to-face club talks, but they are on offer. So if your club does want to talk and it exists within the sites, obviously we have limited resources. So if your club is out, you know, further outside, then we have to kind of focus on those in the main areas. But hence why we're putting on these webinars so we can reach as many people as possible. As we know with clubs, you don't necessarily stay and sail in the same area. You'll go all the way along the coast. So all the sites that we're covering are important. And although the project is just focusing on the 5 sites, it doesn't mean there's not seagrass in other areas. It's just in terms of focus, these were the sites that were in unfavourable condition, and the project had to choose, you know, set areas. But as part of the project, like I said, everything we are raising awareness can be adopted elsewhere. We're just hoping that the kind of seagrass maps can be obtainable no matter where you're going sailing and where you're choosing to anchor, rather than just in the 5 sites. But yeah, if you want a talk at your club, then drop us a line, fill in the survey, put it in the comments, or you can email environment@rwa.org.uk, and that will come through to our environment and sustainability team at the RWA, and then we can sort something out with you. Any more questions? Might have come to the end. So just a reminder of the survey link that I put in at the top. Have a go at doing it after the webinar. Just sit with a glass of wine or a cup of tea or whatever you got. Takes 3 or 5 minutes. There we go.
There is one. Sorry, Kate, there is one more question.
Have I missed?
Someone's asked, is it a coincidence that most of the replanting is in popular anchorages, e.g. nothing in Lyme Bay? So the reason that the 5 sites were chosen is that they are in designated special areas of conservation, which Lyme Bay and Tor Bay is a designated special area of conservation, specifically for its reefs and submerged or partially submerged sea caves. There are large areas of seagrass in Tor Bay. If ever you've been around Elbury Cove and just outside of Goodrington. But what we were focusing on were the areas that were in unfavourable condition, whereas Tor Bay is, I'm not sure of its official status, but it's not one of the areas highlighted as needing restoration at this moment in time. So I hope that's answered your question.
Yeah, there is also a question about putting advanced mooring systems into popular anchorages where seagrass is being encouraged to regrow. And there is work being done at Studland at the moment, which is quite a large area of seagrass and also a very popular anchorage. So there's work going on there with voluntary no anchor zones and advanced mooring systems. And there's going to be a lot more happening there over the next year or two.
Okay. Is there any more that I've missed? Mine are, I think my messages are coming up in funny orders. I'm missing some of them. That might be it. Okay, with the survey link, I'll have a go at putting that in the chat. If not, I will send out a follow-up email with the survey link in there for you to fill in over the next few days while it's fresh in your mind. But yeah, it'd be great if you could fill that in. I will put the link in again now and hopefully it'll work. I'm not sure why it's not coming up for some of you. I don't know if that's for everybody or just a few of you. But I'll give it another go. Okay, so just pop that in there now again.
If you are having problems with the link, if you copy and paste it into your browser, I think that's much more reliable.
There we go. Oh, okay. I'll just give you a bit more time to get that link and then pop it in there. But yeah, it literally is about 3-5 minutes. It'll take you to fill in. Okay, I think we've great. It's worked. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this evening. Thank you so much to all the speakers for coming along and sharing information. I hope you've learned lots. And we will be having future webinars. So always go back to the Green Blue website, have a look at join our webinars, and we have webinars going on for the other sites as well. So if you do go sailing in those other and want some more up-to-date information, then you can drop in on those. And we will be doing up-to-date ones because it is a 4-year project. So, and I think we've got an extension for the project now as well, which is fantastic. So it will be running through to sort of 2024. And like I said, it's ongoing, we're learning, and we very much value communication from the boating community, because essentially we want to make this work. We want to still be able to access these places, but you know, we do have a passion for safeguarding these habitats, and we want to make it work for that. Okay, well, thank you everybody, and have a lovely rest of the evening. Take care. Bye.